She's a radical left person at a level that nobody's seen. She picked a radical left man.
It looks so dark in this. No, why do I? Mom. Look pale. Mom.
Look at me. I don't know why. Okay.
Mira. I'm morenita now. Like morenita.
You are morenita.
Khaleesi, come here. Khaleesi, come here. It's my decision.
You're recording.
It's my decision. Oh, yeah, that's pretty. Can I go blind?
It's gonna wash you out so bad.
Care.
No, I care. I'm not gonna let you do
No,
that.
stop. A loser.
Why are you crying? You're not gonna dye your hair. Estás loca. No te voy a dejar hasta que...
You're letting somebody dye her hair blonde
Because she's lighter. She's lighter.
Hi there, friend. I've got a book recommendation for you. This is Brown is Beautiful. In the book, we follow the main character around her neighborhood and through nature as she discovers all the beautiful brown things in the world. In the author's note, the author says, I grew up in a town where very few people look like me. Sometimes my classmates would comment on the color of my skin. Sometimes my friends would. And sometimes, when everyone else was laughing at the comments, I would laugh about them too. I'm not sure why I did that. Maybe I didn't know any better, or maybe it was easier that way. After all, brown had negative connotations in the American books I read and in the Hindi movies I watched as a child. To make matters worse, fairness creams have been sold in the South Asia diaspora for years, promoting colorist ideas. But as I grew up, I realized that brown is a pancake breakfast with my family and friends. Brown is football Saturdays in the fall. Brown is a walk through the woods with neighbors. Brown is a cozy bookstore full of diverse, empowering stories. Brown is my friend's hair as it ripples like a river when she laughs. Brown's in my children's eyes full of kindness and pride. Brown is the color of my skin, the color of me. I wish I had known earlier just how much there is to love about the color brown. I know it now, and I hope this book serves as a reminder to the world that brown in all its shades is truly beautiful. That's Brown is Beautiful.
Trans men contributed greatly to lesbian history and lesbian rights. So that's when I laugh when a lot of you say that men cannot be lesbians. Trans men are not identifying as lesbians as a sexuality. They're doing it as a social and a political statement. And it is greatly intersected with non-binary and more specifically trans-masculine lesbians. That is why you see people identifying as lesboys, lesdykes, boydykes. A lot of trans men were once lesbians. So politically and socially, they do have a place that is rooted within the lesbian community, as they are too harmed and also suffer under the patriarchy. This community wasn't built upon white skinny lesbians that were always femme, but it was built on people of color, specifically black people, that were trans, hypermasculine, and that could not guise or hide who they were when they stepped outside.
In Palestine and all over the world, the fight against colonialism and corporations' destruction of the planet are intrinsically linked. Look at Chevron. Everyone knows that Chevron is one of the world's biggest climate criminals. But the oil giant is also fueling Israel's genocide in Palestine. As Israel bombs hospitals, homes, and schools in Gaza, Chevron supplies them with energy from 2 Israeli-claimed gas fields in the Mediterranean, making millions in the process. Ending Israel's genocide in Gaza and Israeli apartheid is a climate justice issue. Israel is destroying Palestinian lives, but also destroying Palestinian lands and resources through its warfare and industries that pollute and destroy the environment. We cannot stand by and do nothing. I'm joining Palestinian global calls to boycott Chevron. Together we are calling for Chevron to withdraw from its projects with Israel. Join the movement to defend human rights and protect the planet by pledging to boycott Chevron now.
I can't be autistic. I don't struggle with transitions.
Honey, you gotta get up. We're gonna be late.
I know, I just can't.
I know I need to get in the shower, but I don't want to go from being dry to wet. I want to get out of the shower, but I don't want to go from being warm to cold.
It's September 1st. Are you ready for fall?
Whoa. There's still 3 more weeks until the first day of fall.
But I thought you loved fall.
I do, but I still need some time to say goodbye to summer.
So when do you think you'll be ready for fall?
Probably October 1st.
Okay, I am so hungry. Are you ready for lunch?
Hold on, I need to get situated here. Sunglasses, purse. I need to change my clothes. I need to change my socks. I need to go to the bathroom. I need to have some water, and then we'll talk about lunch, okay?
Honey, aren't you gonna start eating?
Yeah, I just need a second to go from, like, not eating to eating.
Can't the future just wait? Can't the deadlines come fashionably late? I could push every goal back, take control back if they'd roll back the rate at which time starts to fly.
Please stop, please watch this entire video, and please do all the things. With Hurricane Helene battering the South, going rampant through Florida, hitting Atlanta, we have to remember something that's really important, which is they have not really evacuated most of the prisoners who are in these prisons in the way of this hurricane. Yeah, you heard me right. And nobody's reporting about this. In Florida, they moved something around 4,600 inmates, but everybody else, they left there. In counties with mandatory evacuation orders, with government officials in Florida saying that if you stay there, you need to write your information on your leg. They left people in those buildings below sea level because they don't see them as people. They don't see those women and men as people. Something needs to fucking change.
White leftists, white femme leftists on the internet in particular, are playing with a Fisher-Price My First Civic set that says activism happens one cause at a time. This is why you follow black women, because they've been at this longer than you've been alive.
Stop harming Israel!
Stop harming Israel!
Stop harming Israel!
Stop harming Israel!
Stop funding Israel!
Stop funding Israel!
Stop funding Israel!
Stop funding Israel!
Stop arming Israel!
Stop arming Israel!
Stop arming Israel!
Stop arming Israel!
Stop bombing Gaza!
Stop bombing Gaza!
Stop bombing Gaza!
Stop bombing Gaza!
Netflix main character, Netflix should hire me because I'm disabled, gay, and Jewish, but yet Netflix couldn't even hire a blind person to play Toph, a blind character, after doing a whole global search for a blind person to play that character. Here are some stats about disabled people in acting, about how many disabled characters are at TV shows, movies, and representation. And here's how much of us are represented in the US. We should be on screen because we're real, we exist. Disability isn't sad, disability isn't tragic, disability is just a fact of life. Blind people exist, and blind people who can fight like Toph exist. And even if they can't fight like Toph, when in history of acting hasn't an actor been trained to do something that they've had to do in a movie? Why can't that same courtesy be extended to blind actors? Netflix did that whole search and then went and hired a seeing actor. In this new rendition of Avatar: The Last Airbender, they said that this actor will be using a consultant and person from the blind community to have accurate representation. You know what would be accurate representation? To hire a blind actor to portray the character that is blind. No, I'm not an easy Netflix main character. Netflix hasn't hired me. I would love to be on the screen one day to help bring disability representation. There aren't enough parts out there for disabled people. Hopefully I can work with other disabled people to make some of those parts and make space for other marginalized voices, but I'm not quite there yet. Hope you guys learned something from this, because that's just not reality.
Why do black Americans keep asking me if it's safe to visit Mexico? You're a black person living in the USA. I think you're asking the wrong questions. Don't let the US propaganda get to you. We don't have sundown towns.
Hi, Guatemalan here and Black American, but I don't need to be of that region to tell you why Black people do our due diligence before traveling anywhere, including to places like Mexico or Guatemala. Because there's this thing called global raciality, thus global anti-Blackness. But let's not get into the global sphere. Let's talk about Mexico specifically. And you may be thinking, why is a Guatemalan talking about Mexico? Well, there's a lot of shared histories and cultures to keep it short. not to mention they are right next to each other, separated only by a nation-state border, which is a colonial abstraction. So the reality is anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity is a part of the cultural fabric of Mexico. For those who may not know, there's this thing called the casta system, which dates back to colonial times, which positioned Black and Indigenous people at the very bottom, and those legacies of that hierarchy are still alive today. How so? Well, African-descended and Indigenous people in Mexico and Guatemala continue to fight for their sovereignty and equity. For example, Maya movements in Mexico are actively fighting for Indigenous sovereignty, land rights, environmental protections, cultural preservation, and more. And Afro-Mexicans, who have long been marginalized and excluded from national narratives alongside Indigenous groups, were officially recognized for the first time in the 2020 census. Activists have been fighting for greater representation and recognition of Afro-Mexican rights, pushing for access to basic services like access to education and healthcare in their communities. So when you tell Black Americans don't fall for the propaganda, the implication is that we're blindly believing something that is unlikely to be true. We are intelligent enough to be curious about the racial dynamics of a place prior to us traveling there, and for good reason. It seems like you may be proud of your country, and you may want to make it look like it's not a racist place. There are beautiful things, people, cultures, knowledges, etc. in Mexico, like there are in the US, like there are in Guatemala. That said, I usually remind folks of this next quote in the context of the US, but I think it may apply here too. Malcolm X said, "You're not to be so blind with patriotism that you can't face reality." Like the US, Mexico is a nation state. It's a colonial enterprise that was founded through unethical means. We have to contend with this because if you love Mexico, how could you work to improve it if you turn your gaze away from its issues? Just something to think about. I intended this to be a constructive addition to the conversation you have opened for us.
Psychiatry and social work as forms of soft policing is very polarizing for a lot of people because they have been framed to think of it as a benevolent good, as something that can only help reduce harm, not produce harm. And I don't see how that is when people on this app actively exercise the worst parts of it all the time. The second a creator says something unsavory or unlikable or people don't like their take, you will get a wall of comments calling them a narcissist or having antisocial personality disorder if they are men, or bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder if they are women. People don't even realize how gendered they are in these like preconceived discriminations about mental illness. And those terms, those diagnoses have political and legislative weight to them that oftentimes people don't have to think about until it is them on the other side of it. It's part of why whenever you see the government or anyone else get on the Let's Stop Stigmatizing Mental Health campaign, they are never talking about psychotic disorders. They are never talking about antisocial personality disorder. They're never talking about narcissistic personality disorder. They're never talking about personality disorders or in general. They're almost always talking about mood disorders, which can be very well regulated with medication. But also because we live in a very sanist society, and if people had to actively challenge what it means for these diagnoses to affect the way that they live in the world, legislators can do it as effectively. And if you don't know what sanism is, sanism, mentalism, or psychophobia refers to the systemic discrimination against or oppression of individuals perceived to have a mental disorder or cognitive impairment. It lives under the umbrella of ableism, but it is more specific to perceived psychological or cognitive decline. And legislatively, sanism is one of the most effective tools for the carceral state. Being able to call people crazy or insane or psychotic is powerful because it means that you can eventually take control of their life entirely. I'm saying this as somebody who's been on the patient side of sanism as well as on the provider side, having to watch it be navigated when I worked in mental health. I was under the governing body of OMH for years at the nonprofit that I was at, and you see this happen all the time very effectively, and you realize pretty early on it is not an incident of policing, like it is an active design of it. The 5150, Baker Act if you're in Florida, 939 if you're here in New York are a perfect example and design of what it means to live in a sanist society. The second you're able to claim that somebody is impaired to their detriment, that they are a danger to you or other people, you have essential total control over their lives past the 72-hour period. And part of that is because whoever is trying to get you 5150'd has the power and the knowledge of knowing that the law that allows them to hold you involuntarily for 72 hours must consider your prior relevant information and the historical course of that mental illness. That information is not coming from you. You are considered an unreliable narrator in these scenarios. That information is coming from whatever is on record. So think about hospitalizations, incarceration, case notes, and whoever it is trying to get you admitted, which is oftentimes a therapist, a psychiatrist, police, because again, this is a law that they are allowed to authorize. And the things it'll be used for is remarkable. I will never forget the first year I started working in mental health. One of my clients got assaulted by a police officer, and then she was 5150'd so that she would not talk. And if you pay attention to the headlines, you'll see that same behavior. This happened last year in Pennsylvania, where a state trooper assaulted his ex-girlfriend and then got her 5150'd so that she couldn't talk, and so that she would be considered an unreliable narrator when she went to press charges against him for the assault. But what having these disorders also does is set you up really well for things like AOTs in New York State, known as Kendra's Law, in which they can decide you are so impaired, so declined by your mental illness or your cognitive impairment that you don't need to really have control over much. And under an AOT, you can oftentimes be assigned a payee, so you don't have control of your assets or your money anymore, or prior or future inheritances. You'll have court-mandated therapy, court-mandated medication management. Oftentimes with my clients, we would see them on IMs because they were considered unreliable in their ability to maintain their med management. And these are not temporary situations. There are people I know who have been on AOTs for a decade plus, but it's not a form of policing. It's psychiatric parole, but what people don't realize, or maybe what they don't care about, is that it's all good and well to hate quote unquote crazy until it's easy to say that you are. People don't realize how easy it is, how one bad encounter in your life can set you up for legislative actions like this, can make you a ward of the state like that. But it's just easy. You don't have to do any real introspection. People don't know how to just not like people, how to just find them unsavory, to just say, I didn't appreciate that take. Why do people have to be narcissists? Why do they have to have borderline personality disorder? Why do they have to have bipolar personality disorder? Why do they have to have antisocial personality disorder? What does it say about those illnesses to you that people having them are the only reasons you can find them unagreeable or dislikable? Because also, it means that you think that these disorders inherently make people bad people. That's literally what you're arguing. When someone you don't like has a bad take on there and everybody's in the comments I knew he was a narcissist. What does that mean to you? Does that means that the disorder itself you think is immutable? That it means people have to function as unethical, immoral people in the world. You're not diagnosed with shit and you're a bitch. What does that say? It's just really exhausting having to see what this does to people for real in the real world. And then have to hop on here and every time somebody says a take you don't like. Now, psych diagnoses. You haven't gone to therapy in 9 years. You have no degree, but you're the authority on what people have and don't have. And let's say you're right. Let's say you're right. 1 in 27 people you encounter have an antisocial personality disorder. Are 1 in 27 people you know evil, malicious? Are they horrible people? No. Because it has nothing to say about the illness. These illnesses are policing forces. To be diagnosed with these is to be assigned a power to the state that they should not have over you. But y'all don't think that critically. Nothing's that deep. I know. So you'll just keep being shitty people and tell yourself you can't be. Because it's not in the DSM-5 yet.